Secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day, everybody. It's the 15th of August 2015, 4 p.m. in the Netherlands, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which means it's Solvinur Event time every Saturday. How are you doing, guys? If you go to the website ucy.tv, like 3 letters, U, C and Y, not spell it all out, you will find the chat link there. And there's already a couple of people there. Unknown37, Dan, Matty, Otto, Liza, aka Palupa, which always reminds me of a wolf, Lupus, Tomato, and Victory Through Vegetables. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat there. I'll try and keep an eye on it, and I'll see what I can do with the questions. Today I had planned to do some more fallacies, and we've done these once before. It's a list of 42, but it's okay to repeat them with like intervals of 2 months, 6 months, half a year, or something like that. It's okay to repeat them. They should like sink into your consciousness, and whenever somebody commits a fallacy, like we've been learning here, it will automatically pop back up, right? So I don't know about what the medical establishment will say about memory. I think it's much more tied to consciousness than they are willing to admit. Most of proof of this effect, this gravitational effect, in the sense that they claim that it's there because of this particle called a graviton, but they can't seem to locate this particle, right? So that's also bogus science in itself. But then, accepting that as a premise, then saying, well, we look out in the sky and we see that, things do not seem to act as they're supposed to under our gravity laws. It's like they have the audacity to set the laws and then expect nature to follow it. It's insane. It's Kantian rubbish is what it is. Right? So then it doesn't conform to their laws, and so what do? Well, let's just add some new equations and invent a new energy, and because we can't see it, we'll call it dark energy and dark matter, right? So, you know, it's insane, the kind of fallacies that we run into. The fallacy that they are committing is that, you know, they will say that, well, this gravity has to exist. Well, really? You know, it has to be based on this graviton idea. Okay. And then if you claim otherwise, you're the nutcase, right? But if in fact you are the one holding the ground. That's what they call this in philosophy, because the negative holds the ground. If they can't prove that this graviton particle actually exists, they're living in la-la land. And you are very well entitled to hold your ground and say it's nonsense, because you haven't given the proof. You see? This is a very important fallacy to keep in mind. Onus of proof is what it's called. And that goes the other way around too, you know. If we claim something, right, we have to be able to provide proof of things that we claim. You don't want to be thrown in with the garbage by an ad hominem attack of people calling you a conspiracy nut job, right? So we were going through this list of 42 fallacies. We are at number 24 at this point. I hope you guys all have something to drink. Like, I got coffee here. The Dutch are famous for drinking coffee. Do it any time of the day, and there's no word for it in English, but we call it gezellig. The best translation is cozy. You know, sit around the table, drink coffee, have a discussion. Yeah. Alright, so fallacy, false dilemma, also known as black and white thinking. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I'm a bit like that. You know, things are either true or they're not. That's called black and white thinking. But you can make a mistake with that, and this is what this is about. The description is as follows. A false dilemma is a fallacy in which a person uses the following pattern of quote-unquote reasoning, right? It's between quotes because it's not valid reasoning. 1. Either claim X is true or claim Y is true, right? So that's something, it's a bit different than what I said, right? I said things are either true, right, or they are not. You could also say that as things either exist or they don't. Right, this is said a little bit different. It's more specific, and that's where the mistake is made. Right, either claim X is true or claim Y is true, when it could very well be that both claims are false. Right. Like South Africa committed the 9/11 attacks, or Belgium committed the 9/11 attacks, right? claim Y is false, this is next step, therefore claim X is true, right? So just because Belgium didn't orchestrate the 9/11 attacks doesn't mean that South Africa did, right? This line of reasoning is fallacious because if both claims could be false, then it cannot be inferred that one is true because the other is false. That is the case made clear by the following example. Alright, I already gave you an example, so we can just skip that. There are cases in which there are only two options, right? They are called opposites. No, let's see. Contraries, I mean, not opposites. Right, so we've talked a lot about contradictions. Yeah, there's a difference between contradictions and contraries. Contradictions doesn't mean that either one is true, right? But with contraries, it does mean that either one is true. Example given here is 1, Bill is dead or he's alive. 2, Bill is not dead. 3, therefore Bill is alive. Alright, so that's a good line of reasoning. There's nothing absolutely wrong with any of that. But they'd have to be contraries. Let me grab some coffee, guys. So, another example of false dilemma. Senator Jill will have to cut education funding this year. Well, that would be a good idea, right? Less indoctrination of children. Senator Bill says, why? And then Senator Jill says, well, either we cut the social programs or we live with a huge deficit and we can't live with the deficit. Alright, so instead of cutting the social programs, you could also cut military spending, for instance. 2. Bill says, Jill and I both support having prayer in public schools. And then Jill says, hey, I never said that. And then Bill says, you're not an atheist, are you, Jill? Well, even if Jill is not an atheist, she doesn't have to comply with the idea that you should force your ideas on other people, right? You can be a Christian and not try to win souls, as they say, right? If we get to the end of this, there's more about Christianity. You know, just in case we run out of fallacies here, I just added one more, one very important one, introduced by Ayn Rand. It's the stolen concept fallacy. It's used so many times and it's pretty hard to spot. Right? You make an argument and then somebody else tries to disprove what you say, but the thing that he uses is actually what you base your argument on. So he stole your concept, see? He's contradicting himself in some way. He's self-refuting himself in some way. And those are pretty hard to spot, to be honest with you. So you have to be very wary, listen very carefully, find out what people base their statements upon, and check out if they're not using the stolen concept on you. So, next example is, look, you are going to have to make up your mind. Either you decide that you can afford this stereo, or you decide you are going to do without music for a while. Right? So that kind of fallacy might be used by parents against their children or something. Okay, Popalupa. Yeah, I do, let's see, advise people to not use the player on the website, but get yourself something like a Winamp or something like that, and get the link from there. They seem to be more stable than this flash player. You know, that's also something that bugs me. It's like these flash updates, right? Every single time they find something wrong with this player, with this flash thingy, and even governments seem to get attacked. Well, how stupid can you be, you know, as a government, to be using such crappy software and then complain, "Whoa, we're being hacked"? You know, it's insane. Doesn't make any sense at all. And also Windows, you know, that company, Microsoft, should not even let these flash player stuff on. You know, they should block it. Right? So the question then becomes, why don't they? Well, guess what? They're part of it, right? They're part of the spying and things like that business. Right? So they don't have any incentive to block malicious software, right? Because they're malicious themselves. Alright, so either you can decide you can afford the stereo, or you decide you're going to do without music for a while. Right, so you don't need a whole stereo set to be able to listen to music. You can just buy a $10 or $5 pocket radio, right? And that's the false dilemma. End of that one. Let's see which one's next. Gambler's fallacy. Alright. Gambler's fallacy is committed when a person assumes that a departure from what occurs on average or in the long term will be corrected in the short term. The form of this fallacy is as follows. 1. X has happened. 2. X departs from what is expected to occur on average or over the long term. 3. Therefore, X will come to an end soon. Alright, this doesn't really make sense to me. It reminds me of a poker lesson called about the topic of expected value. You know, it has to do with certain situations you might get in when playing hands at a poker site or at your local bar, playing no limit hold'em, and for instance you hold ace king, that's the highest 2 cards. Let's say they are clubs and diamonds, and you are in, say, late position, right? I'm kind of assuming you guys know a little bit about this. It doesn't matter if you don't. And somebody raises before you, you call, and the flop comes 2 hearts, right? Something like ace of hearts, 10 of hearts and 6 of diamonds, right? Something like that. And so your ace king has made a pair, 2 aces with a nice kicker, the king, and the raiser has come out betting, right, with a certain percentage of the pot. Now you suspect that the raiser has 2 hearts, so this means that if in the following 2 cards to come, right, there's 2 more cards to come. If any of them are hearts, then he wins the pot. At least he beats your 2 aces with a king. And so, depending on how much he bets, you either call or not, right? This is you calculate your expected value, which means that in a certain percentage of these games, let's say you play them 1,000 times over and over again, let's assume that you win 57% of them, something like that, or 53%, then it would be usually okay to call. Alright, so you also have to take into account how much he's betting. You know, especially if he bets small, then it's okay to call, because if you do it 1,000 times, you're going to end up positive in the end. Right? So that's a way to decide whether or not you need to call or fold. Right? So it has to do with chance. Right? So I don't get this back in this example, like 1x has happened, 2x departs from what is expected to occur on average or over the long term. 3, therefore x will come to an end soon. Right? So another example would be if you go to a casino and you go play, I don't know what's it called, that game in English, roulette, right? And black drops, and another turn and black drops, and another turn and black drops, and another turn and black drops. And therefore, you know, X will come to an end soon, means that, you know, soon red is gonna drop, right? Well, actually, no. I've seen black drop 11 times in a row. And at that same table, you know, just like 2-3 minutes later, 10 times red came in a row, right? So that's a kind of the fallacy that's being meant here. There are 2 common ways this fallacy is committed. In both cases, a person is assuming that some result may be due simply because what has previously happened departs from what would be expected on average over the long term. Right? So this ties back to the concept of expected value, no limit hold'em. Right, so but 4 times black or 5 times black, you know, that's short. That's short term. You know, long term is like 1,000 rolls, right? Then the average would be like something like 498 red and 502 black. You know, let's just forget about the 0 in that case. The first involves events whose probabilities of occurring are independent of one another. For example, one toss of a coin, normal coin, does not affect the next toss of the coin. So each time the coin is tossed, there is a 50% chance of it landing heads and a 50% chance of it landing tails. Right? So that percentage stays the same. whether you get 10 times heads in a row or not, it's still 50%. Suppose that a person tosses a coin 6 times and gets head each time. If he concludes that the next toss will be tails because tails is due, then he will have committed the gambler's fallacy. This is because the result of previous tosses have no bearing on the outcome of the 7th toss. It has a 50% chance of it being heads and 50% chance of it being tails, just like any toss. Alright, so this is the gambler's fallacy. It's not done yet, but I'm just wondering what this has to do with a logic, you know. It's this doesn't seem to help when making arguments. You're in a discussion with somebody about you know, topics that like matter in life, you know, and then this gambler's fallacy comes up. I'm like, well, what's this about? You know, this is like a side issue or something. Hey JJ, how you doing? And Jojo has also appeared. A couple of more people. Mama Delete? Mama the Elite? Or Mama Delight? Never seen you before. Welcome to the chat. Joe has joined. JJ Hopper is also there. Quite sure if you were there before. And the rest I mentioned at the start of the hour. Right. More on this gambler's fallacy. The second involves cases whose probabilities of occurring are not independent of one another. For example, suppose that a boxer has won 50% of his fights over the past 2 years. Suppose that after several fights he has won 50% of his matches this year. That he has lost his last 6 fights and he has 6 left. If a person believed that he would win his next 6 fights because he has used up his losses and is due for a victory, then he would have committed the gambler's fallacy. After all, the person would be ignoring the fact that the result of one match, it says here can, but it should say cannot influence the result of the next one. For example, the boxer might have been injured in one match, which would lower his chances of winning his last 6 fights. Well, I don't know exactly how it is in the boxing world, but I'm thinking that if you've won a certain amount of fights, that you come up against stronger enemies, right? You know, they wouldn't, if you say like 1/10 of your 12 fights put you up against somebody who has like 1/2 of the last 12 fights. So I think this is kind of a bad example to use. Next, it should be noted that not all predictions about what is likely to occur are fallacious. If a person has good evidence for his predictions, then they will be reasonable to accept. For example, if a person tosses a coin and gets 9 heads in a row, it would be reasonable for him to conclude that he will probably not get another 9 in a row again. Is that true? I guess so. I don't think there's anything wrong with that line of thinking. This reasoning would not be fallacious as long as he believed his conclusion because of an understanding of the laws of probability. In this case, if he concluded that he would not get another 9 heads in a row because the odds of getting 9 heads in a row are lower than getting fewer than 9 heads in a row, right? Then this reasoning would be good and his conclusion would be justified. Hence, determining whether or not the gambler's fallacy is being committed often requires some basic understandings of the laws of probability. Right? So this seems to have more to do with mathematics, than logic. All right? Although mathematics and logic do have ties with each other. Examples of gambler's fallacy. Bill is playing against Doc in a World War II tank battle game. Doc has had a great streak of luck and he's been killing Bill's tanks left and right with good die rolls. Bill, who has few tanks left, decides to risk all in a desperate attack on Doc. He's a bit worried that Doc might wipe him out, but he thinks that since Doc's luck on rolling has been great, Doc must be due for some bad dice rolls. Bill launches his attack and Doc butchers his forces. Alright, so if you roll 1-6 with a dice, it doesn't decrease your chances of rolling another 6 the next time. And Dan puts another link in the chat about roulette. Chances of a ball landing in the black slot. I guess it's a little less than 50% since there's a green one in there together with 18 red ones against 18 black ones. All right. So there's 19 non-black against 18 black. Which means a percentage of about what? 50 minus 4 or something? Minus 3? I don't know. Next example of gambler's fallacy. Jane says to Bill, Jane, I will be able to buy that car I always wanted soon. And then Bill says, why? Did you get a raise? Jane says, no, but I've been playing the lottery all these years. And then Bill says, yes, you buy a ticket for every drawing without fail. And then Jane says, and I've lost every time. And then Bill says, so why do you think you'll win this time? Well, Jane says, well, after all those losses, I'm due for a win. Good example, gambler's fallacy. Joe and Sam are at the racetrack betting on horses. Joe says, you see that horse over there? He has lost his last 4 races. I'm going to bet on him. And then Sam says, why? I think he will probably lose. Then Joe says, no way, Sam. I look up the horse's stats and he has won half his races in the past 2 years. Since he has lost 3 of his last 4 races, he will have to win this race. So I'm betting the farm on him. Sam says, are you sure? And Joe says, of course I'm sure. That pony is due. Alright? So that's a good example. I like the last one better. This one, you have to include the horse's mood. Horses have moods also. You might not want to race this week, right? You might be injured, right? Alright, so that was gambler's fallacy. Next one is maybe a bit difficult, because I do remember discussing this, but the name doesn't ring a bell. Well, it does ring a bell in the fact that I recognize it, but I don't remember what it was about. It's called the genetic fallacy. So let's see what this is. A genetic fallacy is a line of reasoning in which a perceived defect in the origin of a claim or thing is taken to be evidence that discredits the claim or thing itself. What the heck is this? I half understand this sentence. A genetic fallacy is a line of reasoning in which a perceived defect in the origin of a claim, what's that, the origin of a claim, is taken to be evidence that discredits the claim or thing itself. Well, let's just continue and see where we get. It is also a line of reasoning in which the origin of a claim or thing is taken to be evidence for the claim or thing. It has the following form. 1. The origin of a claim or thing is presented. 2. The claim is true or false, or the thing is supported or discredited. Alright. It is clear that this sort of reasoning is fallacious. For example, Bill claims that 1 and 1 equals 2. However, my parents have brought me up to believe that 1 and 1 is 5. So Bill must be wrong. It should be noted that there are some cases in which the origin of a claim is relevant to the truth or falsity of the claim. For example, a claim that comes from a reliable expert is likely to be true. So that's what they mean with origin. Like, who made the claim? Alright, let's see. Now that we know what origin is, maybe we can understand the first sentence better. A genetic fallacy is a line of reasoning in which a perceived defect in the origin of a claim is taken to be evidence that discredits the claim or thing itself. It should be noted, alright, we already did that, examples of a genetic fallacy. The current Chancellor of Germany was in the Hitler Youth at age 3. With that sort of background, his so-called reform plan must be a fascist program. Alright, so that's, I guess that's a good example. 2. I was brought up to believe in God, and my parents told me God exists. So, he, with a capital H, must. Right, so this sounds more like popularity, or even ad verecundium, appeal to authority, right? 3. Sure, the media claims that Senator Bedfellow was taking kickbacks, but we all know the media's credibility, don't we? Well, yeah, we do. Alright, so that's the end of this one. Let's see if we can get a better one. Put that into Google, genetic fallacy, paste. Let's go search. Genetic fallacy. Word origin comes back again. Genetic fallacy, also known as the fallacy of origins or fallacy of virtue, is a fallacy of irrelevance. Right. So there's groups of fallacies, and irrelevance is one of them. A lot of those fallacies are irrelevant. You know, you come up with something and somebody else tries to attack your argument but starts talking about strawberries when you were talking about soccer, for instance, right? It's totally irrelevant. The genetic fallacy is a fallacy of irrelevance, where a conclusion is suggested based solely on someone's or something's history, origin, or source, rather than its current meaning or context. This overlooks any difference to be found in the present situation, typically transferring the positive or negative esteem from the earlier context. The fallacy therefore fails to assess the claim on its merit. The first criterion of a good argument is that the premises must have bearing on the truth or falsity of the claim in question. Genetic accounts of an issue may be true, and they may help illuminate the reasons why the issue has assumed its present form, but they are irrelevant to its merits. According to the Oxford Companion to Philosophy, the term originated in Maurice Raphael Cohen and Ernest Nagel's book Logic and Scientific Method in 1995. Logic and the Scientific Method. Well, that has to be filled with Kantian garbage, right? There's more here. Argument from age. Not invited here. And examples. But I'm not quite sure if this is a genetic fallacy. Argument from age. This is a common version of the genetic fallacy, where the thing in question is very new or old, so it must be better. Well, we discussed this previously, right? Appeal to novelty and appeal to tradition, right? Examples include products advertised as new or old-fashioned hamburgers. Not invented here. Another variation is to dismiss outside ideas because they did not originate from here. This is the way we've always done it. Right? Appeal to common practice. This fallacy is often abbreviated NH, not invented here. The converse of this is also false. Being foreign does not necessarily mean something is better, or worse, I would say. Another from Edward Damer. You're not going to wear a wedding ring, are you? Don't you know that the wedding ring originally symbolized ankle chains worn by women to prevent them from running away from their husbands? Really, is that so? I would not have thought you would be a party to such a sexist practice? Why the hell is that a sexist practice? There are numerous motives explaining why people choose to wear wedding rings, but it would be a logical fallacy to presume those who continue the tradition are doing so with the intent of promoting sexism. The word ring is kind of interesting, right? You have the rings of Saturn, and a ring is also like a circle, right? Inner circle, outer circle. In Dutch, we use the word ring also when it comes to government. Some people will disagree with me, especially the Dutch people. You know, in the translation for government in Dutch would be regering, right? So you hear the ring at the end. However, the Dutch people will say, well, no, this has nothing to do with a ring, because you're confusing the last 3 letters with an object, right? The last 3 letters, ing, is just a suffix, right? So, grammatically speaking, that argument is correct. However, it doesn't matter how it's written. It really doesn't. The most important thing is how it sounds, right? That's much more important. That's neuro-linguistic programming has to do with how things sound, not how they are spelled on paper, right? So in Dutch, the word regering has that ring, because that's a literal translation the same. R-I-N-G is the same in Dutch as it is in English. So it has that ring of a ring, right? The first word regeer means govern. The word, it starts with R-E-G. I've mentioned this before. This is an interesting 3 letters, R-E-G, Reginia, right? Has to do with royalty. Right, so ring is interesting. Think of Lord of the Rings. It's an interesting word. Now I'm interested in the origins of a wedding ring. What would that be? Origins of wedding ring. Let's see what we get. Let's see what this one says. The origins of a wedding ring and why they are worn on the 4th finger of the left hand. Today I found the history and symbolism behind the tradition of a wedding ring and why in most Western cultures it's worn on the 4th finger of the left hand, otherwise known as the ring finger. Wedding rings today are $1 billion sentiment of love, but no one can really say for sure when this age-old tradition actually started. Some believe that the oldest recorded exchange of wedding rings came from ancient Egypt, about 4,800 years ago. Now, if you've listened to the Solvinur Event 2 weeks ago, you will take a grain of salt with those 8,000 years. Sedges, rushes and reeds growing alongside the well-known papyrus were twisted and braided into rings for fingers and other decorative ornaments worn by the women in those days. The circle is a symbol of eternity, with no beginning or no end, not only to the Egyptians but many other ancient cultures. The hole in the center of the ring also had significance. It wasn't just considered a space, but rather a gateway or door, leading to things and events both known and unknown. To give a woman a ring signifies never-ending and immortal love. Let's hope we get to some origins soon. The materials these rings were made of didn't last very long and soon were substituted with rings made of leather, bone or ivory. The more expensive the material, the more love shown to the receiver. The value of the ring also demonstrated the wealth of the giver. The Romans also eventually adopted this tradition, but with their own twist. Rather than offering a ring to a woman as a symbol of love, they awarded them as a symbol of ownership. Roman men would claim their women with the giving of a ring. Roman betrothal rings were later made of iron and called annulus pro nubus. They symbolized strength and permanence. It is also said that the Romans were the first to engrave their rings. Lord of the Rings again. It was not until about 860 that the Christians used the ring in marriage ceremonies. Even then, it was not the simple plain band as we know it. It usually was highly decorated with engraved doves. Alright, so I want to know about the origins. How others are using it. Let's see if we can find a better link. Origins. Wedding ring history. Oh, it says here it's unknown. The origins. History of wedding ring. Let's see what this one says. One version of the origin of the wedding ring states that during prehistoric times, prehistoric, right, that means before people started writing, the groom would bind the bride's ankles and wrists with grass to keep her soul from escaping. Some say it was really to keep her from running away. Once the ceremony was complete, yeah, right. So that's insane, right? You can't make like a ring from grass and then expect it to keep people from running away. Does that make any sense to you? You got like a chain of straws, like, you know, it doesn't make any sense. Once the ceremony was complete, he would remove the rope and tie it to one of her fingers. This tradition gradually evolved from grass to rope to leather and finally to a metal band. Another story comes from the ancient Romans, who placed a ring on the third finger because it was believed to house the vena amoris, or the vein of love, which ran directly to the heart. They chose the left hand because the heart was then believed to be on the left side of the chest. These traditions were spread round the world as new lands were discovered. Thus we have the tradition of the wedding band that is still highly recognized today across many religions and cultures. Right? So nobody can say with absolute certainty, it seems, not from this short investigation anyway, where it came from. There are the next one from Morris Engel. America will, this is still about genetic fallacy, right? America will never settle down. Look at the rabble rousers who founded it. Yeah, that's a good example. A common current example of this style of reasoning can be called the etymological fallacy. Well, that's interesting. This presents arguments based on the supposed real meaning of certain words, where that real meaning is in fact what the word meant centuries ago, or what its root word in Latin and Greek, etc. meant. Yes. A popular tactic. It is only shown to be fallacious and it is easily shown to be fallacious and misleading. Alright, so etymological fallacy, that's interesting, right? You know, I use sometimes etymological thinking, I guess you could call it. to be able indeed to find out what the word meant originally, right? Why do I do that? Because I want to protect my mind from newspeak attacks, right? That's exactly what we're dealing with here. Political correctness, bending of definitions. Language changing, culture creation, attempts by scrutinous people who want to control us, right? So that's why it's important to get some etymological thinking inside. All right, that's enough for genetic fallacies. Kick that one away and see what's next. Guilt by association. Alright, that one's easy. You should be able to figure that out just by the title. Guilt by association is a fallacy in which a person rejects a claim simply because it is pointed out that people she dislikes accept the claim. This sort of reasoning has the following form. 1. It is pointed out that person A does not like, accept. Let me try and reread that. It is pointed out that people person A does not like, accept claim B. I hope I have the right intonation there. 2, therefore P is false. It is clear that this sort of reasoning is fallacious. For example, the following is obviously a case of poor reasoning. You think that 1 is 1 is 2, but Charles Manson, Joseph Stalin, and Ted Bundy all believe that 1 and 1 equals 2, so you shouldn't believe it. Right, good example. The fallacy draws its power from the fact that people do not like to be associated with people they dislike. Hence, if it is shown that a person shares a belief with people he dislikes, he might be influenced into rejecting that belief. Alright, just because you dislike somebody doesn't mean that he's wrong, right? In such cases, the person will be rejecting the claim based on how he thinks or feels about the people who hold it, and because he does not want to be associated with such people. Of course, the fact that someone does not want to be associated with people she or he dislikes does not justify the rejection of any claim. For example, most wicked and terrible people accept that the earth revolves around the sun, and that lead is heavier than helium. No sane person would reject these claims simply because this would put them in the company of people they dislike. Examples of guilt by association. Will and Kaitina are arguing over socialism. Kaitina is a pacifist and hates violence and violent people. Alright, so how passive are you if you hate? Alright, that's not passive. Pacifist, passive. You hear the etymological ties there, right? They probably come from the same root word. Especially if you know what a pacifist is. Kaitina says, I think that the United States should continue to adopt socialist programs. For example, I think that the government should take control of vital industries. Well, she's a fracking nutcase, to throw out an ad hominem there. Will, it sounds like communism really. Will says, so you are for state ownership of industry? Kaitina says, certainly, it's a great idea and will help make the world a less violent place. Well, it's a bad idea. Now, one of the reasons why this is a bad idea is because the incentive is taken away. Will says, well, you know, Stalin also endorsed state ownership on industry. And at last count, he wiped out millions of his own people. Yeah. Pol Pot of Cambodia was also for state ownership of industry. He also killed millions of his own people. Alright, so that's using the wrong arguments here. Right? Will shouldn't make arguments that have nothing to do with the idea of socialism. Right? So I will not deny that there is all of these people being killed in socialist countries. That's not the point. However, when you're talking about a political idea and state ownership of industry, you shouldn't be bringing up that millions of people are being killed. Those two ideas do not mesh with each other, right? It's irrelevant. You see? The leadership of China is for state-owned industry. Here again, he uses the irrelevant argument. They killed their own people in that square. So are you still for state ownership of industry? And then Kaitina says, oh no, I don't want to be associated with those butchers. Right, so that it's a good. What she says is a good example of falling for the fallacy of guilt by association. But Will is using some very strange arguments here. Two, Jen and Sandy are discussing the topic of welfare. Jen is fairly conservative politically, and she has been an active opponent of racism. Sandy is extremely liberal politically. Jen says, I was reading over some private studies of welfare, and I think it would be better to have people work for their welfare. For example, people could pick up trash, put up signs, and maybe even do skilled labor that they are qualified for. This would probably make people feel better about themselves, and it would get money out of our tax. It would get more out of our tax money. Alright, so what's the problem here? Is that if you have people that are unemployed, right? We're talking about welfare, at least that's how it works here in the Netherlands, right? If you are unemployed, you get, quote unquote, welfare, and the government just gives you money. If you force those people to start working even in like skilled labor, what does that mean? First of all, there has to be in Dutch it's opdrachtgever. How would you translate that into English? Somebody who wants that work to be done, right? So like an entrepreneur. You would have to want the skilled labor to do this certain job, right? So what does that mean? That means that other skilled laborers who are not unemployed get their work taken away, right? Which increases their chance of losing their job. You see how this doesn't work? Then second of all, whose fault is it anyway that we have so many people unemployed? Could it have anything to do with the fact that the factories in Germany, not only in Germany, but just using that example, the steel factories in Germany have been disassembled, put on a ship, shipped to China, and put back together there again? Right? So how did that come to be? So, it's better to look at the source of why there are so many people on welfare than to start talking about these people on welfare. Most of the times it's not their fault that they are without a job. So it has more to do with IMF, Bank of International Settlements, World Bank, So-called treaties. The Dutch government also. They are so malicious that they would sign all of these agreements with China, of all places, right? When I grew up as a child, China and Russia, they were the main enemies, Cold War. And now they are like the main economic partners. How can you do that? How can you support the government in China by signing all these contracts with them? It's very malicious, very criminal even. Alright, let me try and get back into what's being said here on the website. Sandy says, I see, so you want to have the poor people out on the streets picking up trash for their checks. Well, that is exactly the position that David Count endorsed. And then Jen says, who's he? I'm surprised you don't know him, seeing how alike you two are. He was a grand Mookie wizard for the Aryan Pure White League and is well known for his hatred of blacks and other minorities. Alright? Irrelevant. Again, this is irrelevant. With your views, you'd fit right into his little racist club. And then Jen says, so I should reject my view just because I share it with some racists? And then Sandy says, of course. Right? So that's not a reason to reject it. But there are other reasons, better reasons. 3. Libard and Ferris are discussing who they are going to vote for as the next department chair in the philosophy department. Libard is a radical feminist, and she despises Wayne and Bill, who are two sexist professors in the department. So you've decided to, get yourself tied in some way to a philosophy department, and you're a feminist. So that means something about your, that says something about your standing in the whole philosophical field, right? Does that even mean you think for yourself? Ferris says, so who are you going to vote for? And then Libard says, well, I was thinking about voting for Jane, since she is a woman and there has never been a woman chair here. But I think Steve will do an excellent job. He has a lot of clout in the university and he's a decent person. Then Ferris says, Wayne and Bill are supporting him. They really like the idea of having Steve as the new chair. You know, those are the two sexes, right? I never thought I'd see you and those two pigs on the same side. And then Lord says, well, maybe it's time that we have a woman as chair. Right? So she lets her decision be influenced about what other people she despises do. Right? Clearly, this is also tied to emotion, right? Appeal to emotion. Next is hasty generalization, also known as fallacy of insufficient statistics, fallacy of insufficient sample, leaping to a conclusion, hasty induction. Alright, I like the last one. Description. This fallacy is committed when a person draws a conclusion about a population. It doesn't necessarily have to be people, but that's where the word, the word population and people are tied. Again, you can hear the etymological ties. Right? They're most likely both based on the same root, people and population. The fallacy is committed when a person draws a conclusion about a population based on a sample that is not large enough. It has the following form. Sample S, which is too small, is taken from population P. 2. Conclusion C is drawn about population P based on S. Right, that's good form description. The person committing this fallacy is misusing the following type of reasoning, which is known variously as inductive generalization, generalization, and statistical generalization. 1. X% of all A's. No, I'm reading that wrong. 1. X% of all observed A's are B's. 2. Therefore, X% of all A's are B's. Right? So it depends. If you manage to observe 100% of all A's, and they seem to be, and they are all B's, then yeah, you can make the claim. But if 1% of all observed A's are B's, of 1% of all observed A's are B's, that doesn't mean that 1% of all A's are B's, because you've observed only a small percentage. This fallacy is committed when not enough A's are observed to warrant a conclusion. If enough A's are observed, then the reasoning is not fallacious. Small samples will tend to be unrepresentative. As a blatant case, asking one person what she thinks about gun control would clearly not provide an adequate sized sample for determining what Canadians in general think about the issue. Alright, I need to roll another cigarette, guys. No. It's I'll put my mouse into where we were, so I can get back to it. But since I just said I'm gonna roll another cigarette, right? And I've mentioned poker also already today. So tomorrow I'm going to go to a bar and play some poker there. Usually there are like 8, 9, 10, sometimes even more people, which would make us force to get even more tables, but usually one table is enough. And we play some no limit hold'em. It's really nice. It's a good environment there. And this is happening in one of the very few bars that allow, you would have to put that in quotes because it's not really allowed, but yeah, as I progress in the story you'll get why. That allows smoking, right? So I can, roll my ciggies there and smoke. However, there's no ashtrays on the table, so. And I went to the bar and I said, well, why is there no ashtrays? And he said, well, smoking is not allowed. And I'm like, well, what am I doing with this cigarette here then, right? Why do I see all these people smoking? And then it came to the discussion that they were asking the government how the bar owner is supposed to enforce people not smoking. And guess what? They had the government, the local government here, had their lawyers try and give an answer, right? And guess what? They can't come up with an answer. Yeah. So they don't, it's so stupid. The government comes with these laws, but then when you ask them, how are we supposed to enforce these laws? They can't give you an answer, right? And so what they do is they allow, quote unquote, allow smoking. Because legally, they can't be held responsible for allowing people to smoke because the local government can't even tell them how they are supposed to enforce it, right? They've tried with wrong arguments, but the owner or somebody who's in charge there, I don't know if it's the owner, but at least it's somebody who's in charge. And he came back with his arguments, and from what I heard was that he mentioned the fact that he can't be stealing, he can't be stealing the tobacco from people. And then the government said, well, actually, no, you can't do that, that's illegal. And so, the bar owner says, well, then how am I supposed to enforce this rule that you guys are putting on me, right? Yeah, Louis, they can't do that. They can't shut the bar down. What they can do is give a fine, and that does happen. There is one other bar that I know of where they allow smoking, and there are ashtrays on the bar and tables there, but there's also a pot there, and people are asked to put in some money so that when the police come and they get a fine, that they can actually pay the fine. Right? So that's another way of dealing with it. But this owner, where I play poker, he's really a bit more stubborn and has come back to the government and is asking for guidelines, as to how he's supposed to enforce people not smoking. And the government doesn't seem to be able to come up with rules that would not break other rules. Right? Like you can't be stealing from people, for instance. Alright, let's get back because my cigarette is rolled. My coffee? I've still got some coffee. The general idea is that small samples are less likely to contain numbers proportional to the whole population, right? For example, if a bucket contains blue, red, green and orange marbles, then a sample of 3 marbles cannot possibly be representative of the whole population of marbles. As the sample size of marble increases, the more likely it becomes that marbles of each color will be selected in proportion to their number in the whole population. The same holds true for things other than marbles, such as people and their political views. Since hasty generalization is committed when the sample, the observed instances, is too small, it is important to have samples that are large enough when making a generalization. The most reliable way to do this is to take a large sample as practical. There are no fixed numbers as to what counts as being large enough. If the population in question is not very diverse, let's say a population of cloned mice, then a very small sample would suffice. If the population is very diverse, then a fairly large sample would be needed. The size of the sample also depends on the size of the population. Obviously, a very small population will not support a huge sample. Finally, the required size will depend on the purpose of the sample. If Bill wants to know what Joe and Jane think about gun control, then a sample consisting of Bill and Jane would, obviously, be large enough. If Bill wants to know what most Americans think about gun control, then a sample of consisting of Bill and Jane would be far too small. People often commit hasty generalization because of bias or prejudice. For example, someone who is a sexist might conclude that all women are unfit to fly jet fighters because one woman crashed one. Is that what they call sexist nowadays? I'm sorry, guys, I may have misunderstood this word sexist here. You know, the word sex is in there. It sounds to me like it has more to do with somebody who is focused on sex more, right? Shouldn't it be called a genderist or something like that? No, it's called a sexist. Now, am I a sexist because I say a woman should not fly a jet fighter plane because I don't think that's what women are supposed to do? I think that men are supposed to fight wars and then only in defense. Right? You don't put women in harm's way. Am I a sexist for saying that? It's insane. It's protecting women. People also commonly commit hasty generalization because of laziness or sloppiness. It is very easy to simply leap to a conclusion and much harder to gather an adequate sample and draw a justified conclusion. Thus, avoiding this fallacy requires minimizing the influence of bias and taking care to select a sample that is large enough. Alright. Oh, that's nice. Got some new people in the chat room. Welcome, Candy. And Mama Delight. Yeah. Welcome. So, what's that button? Pretty cool button. What button are you talking about? Button function? Bleep button function. Oh, that's just for fun. Jules put that up there and she talked about it like a couple of months ago and she said like, it's amazing how many people actually click on there, and how many times they do it. She was laughing out loud. It was hilarious. It's just a fun thing. That was the first time I saw it. I also was like, what's this button do? Yeah. You're scheduled for an interview, Cindy. Candy, I mean. Ah, that's nice. So, tell me a little bit more. What show are you going to be on, so I can actually promote that a little bit? What show? What show? I don't know, because I don't have a time schedule in my head. Scheduled for an interview on the air Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Blah blah. Ooh, about serial killers. Aha, interesting. So let's see. Wednesday night. UCY. Radio. Where are we here? I'm gonna hear a little bit of myself here. I'll try to pause it as soon as. Yeah, I got it paused. Schedule. Right. Wednesday. Hopla, that's where I hear myself again. Wednesday, 8 p.m. The Continual Condition with Jonathan and Stephen. Is that the one? Candy? Continual. Let's see. Is that one? Oh, let's open that. Pause it again. Choop choop. Copy it. Nice to have some new people in the chat. Alright, Candy. So, Wednesday, 8 p.m., The Continual Condition, with our guest, Candy C. Brooke. Check it out, guys. It's always nice to hear people speak when they are also in the chat. Sometimes you know a little bit more about the people you're chatting with. Alright. So, Candy, don't take my event, or as some people call it, a show, as a standard for this radio station. I'm kind of an outsider. I reckon myself as an outsider anyways. You know, I talk about the trivium and logical fallacies and mythology and things like that. Usually bad reasoning is discussed. Language is one of my favorite topics. So, you know, I try and discuss things that are not discussed by most people on UCY.tv. Hey, 8Hawks, what's up, buddy? How you doing? Alright, where were we? One final point is, I guess, where we were. Oh, I'm Dutch, Candy. This is a Dutch accent. He's French, although get lost. No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, kind of. I don't like it that people can tell that I'm Dutch. Some people recognize the accent. Actually, I don't recognize it myself, and that's why I can't improve it. Yeah. So yeah, because I remember when I went to school, for instance, and I heard other people talk in accents too, and I'm like, wow, this is not good. You know, I have this bad accent myself, growing up in Arnhem, where I live, and I need to get rid of that. And I started working on it, trying to speak better Dutch, and I succeeded at that. You know, you can't, if you if I talk to other people here in the Netherlands, they can't tell I'm from Arnhem based on my accent. So that's, you know, I succeeded at that. But it's very hard to get rid of my accent in English, I guess. Alright, so one final point: a hasty generalization, like any fallacy, might have a true conclusion. However, as long as the reasoning is fallacious, there is no reason to accept the conclusion based on that reasoning. Yeah, okay, of course. Alright, so for you, especially Candy, I'm going to reread a thing that I've already reread, but for the two new people in the chat, this is important that you understand, because we're talking about fallacies, right? We've got a whole list of fallacies here. And in order to understand what a fallacy is, you need to know what an argument is. Right? So we go to a section here, it's called Description of Fallacies. In order to understand what a fallacy is, one must understand what an argument is. Very briefly, very briefly, an argument consists of one or more premises and a conclusion. Right? So, knowing that, right, an argument consists of one or more premises and one conclusion. A fallacy then is an error in reasoning, right? So even if your premises are valid, then you could fall into a trap by using wrong logic and come to the wrong conclusion. Right? That's just one example. There are other examples could be that your premises aren't even correct. A premise is a statement that is offered in support of the claim being made. Right? There are two main types of arguments, deductive and inductive. A deductive argument is an argument such that the premises provide complete support for the conclusion. An inductive argument is an argument such that the premises provide some degree of support for the conclusion. If the premises actually provide a required degree of support for the conclusion, then the argument is a good one. Alright, so example I'll give you. Premise 1, all men are mortal. This is the classical example. Premise 1, all men are mortal. 2, Socrates is a man. Right? It's a minor premise. The major premise is all men are mortal. Minor premise, Socrates is a man. Conclusion, Socrates is mortal. Right? So that's a example of deduction. A good deductive argument is known as a valid argument and is such that if all its premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. All right? So the premise that all men are mortal is true. The premise that Socrates is a man is true. And then you infer, that's what it's called, inference, that Socrates is mortal. Right? So that's the logical processing, to use a computer term, that is used in your mind, right? The inference to come to the conclusion. If it is invalid, alright, so a premise can be invalid. If it is invalid or has one or more false premises, it will be unsound. Alright, so you can't base a conclusion on premises that are incorrect. A good inductive argument, this is kind of the other way around than a deductive one. A good inductive argument is known as a strong or cogent inductive argument. It is such that if the premises are true, the conclusion is likely to be true. Alright, so we've learned from Gino Denning. If you want to know more about this topic, try this in your YouTube. I wrote it twice. Your YouTube search engine, and he will give you more, because what we are talking about here, I'll soon hit enter so you can get what I put in the chat room. What we're talking about here is part of the trivium. The trivium is very interesting. It has been deleted from our education around 1900. And the trivium is a mirror or reflects how your mind works. And the logical fallacies part is part of the logic part of the trivium, which is the second part. Trivium is three roads. So there's three parts to the trivium. Grammar, which is not what you think it is. If you've never heard of the trivium before, it's much more than that. Right? There is the normal grammar that they use, which is known as special grammar, like how do words relate to each other within a sentence, right? That is there, but there's also general grammar, and that's much more interesting. They can be seen more like building blocks. So it's grammar, logic, which is the second part, and specifically in that order, by the way. We've been mind controlled because the trivium has been put out of order. They are using logic before grammar, and thereby leading you to conclusions. Alright? They are using your own logic against you. They are using your own reasoning capabilities against you by omitting grammar, by omitting building blocks. Then the third part of the trivium is rhetoric, also known as wisdom. Right, there's another way of saying this is knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Right? There's a computer way of saying it also, input, processing, output. Alright, so the logical fallacies are part of this second, the processing. Alright. Last part of this. A fallacy is, very generally, an error in reasoning. This differs from a factual error, which is simply being wrong about the facts. To be more specific, a fallacy is an argument in which the premises given for the conclusion do not provide the needed degree of support. Right, so you can't make the inference. A deductive fallacy is a deductive argument that is invalid. It is such that it could have all true premises and still have a false conclusion. An inductive fallacy is less formal than a deductive one. They are simply arguments which appear to be inductive arguments, but the premises do not provide enough support for the conclusion. In such cases, even if the premises were true, the conclusion would not be more likely to be true. Wordsmithing, yeah, that's a good analogy, Hopper. I'm assuming you're talking about general grammar. Yeah, it's a good one. Alright, back to where we were. Examples of hasty generalizations. Smith, that's what they call a so-called coincidence, right? Wordsmithing. Now we are coming to 1. Smith, who is from England, decides to attend graduate school at Ohio State University. He has never been to the United States before. The day after he arrives, he is walking back from an orientation session and sees 2 white squirrels chasing each other around in a tree. In his next letter home, he tells his family that American squirrels are white. Alright, so small sample, right? Sam is riding her bike in her hometown in Maine, minding her own business. A station wagon comes up behind her and the driver starts beeping his horn and then tries to force her off the road. That's nice. As he goes by, the driver yells, "Get on the sidewalk where you belong." Alright, that's not allowed here in the Netherlands. Riding your bike on the sidewalk. It's called walk, not for nothing. Sam sees that the car has Ohio plates and concludes that all Ohio drivers are jerks. Bill, you know those example 3. Bill, you know those feminists all hate men. And then Joe says, "Really?" Bill says, "Yeah, I was in my philosophy class the other day, and that Rachel chick gave a presentation." Can you hear the ad hominem in there? Joe, which Rachel? Bill, you know her, she's the one that runs the feminist group over at the Women's Center. She said that men are all sexist pigs. Another ad hominem. I asked her why she believed this, and she said that her last few boyfriends were real sexist pigs. Even if that were true, it's a too small sample, right? Joe, that doesn't sound like a good reason to believe that all of us are pigs. Bill says, "That's what I said." And then Joe says, "What did she say?" Bill says, "She said that she had seen enough of men to know we are all pigs. She obviously hates men." Joe, so do you think all feminists are like her? And then Bill says, "Sure, they all hate men." Right, so he's pointing out a fallacy in somebody else and then committing it himself. Interesting. Next one is ignoring a common cause. Looks like we're not getting to the end of this list today. Also known as questionable cause. This fallacy has the following general structure. A and B are regularly connected, but no third common cause is looked for. Alright. 2, therefore A is the cause of B. This sounds like the totally insane conclusions that NIST made. Alright. If you look at their findings, and I'm sure they're still available on the internet, and you go to the question and answer session of their presentation, you find that it has been asked if NIST actually looked for traces of explosives being used, and they never looked for them. However, in their conclusions, they claim that no explosives were used. Alright, so that's insane, right? This fallacy is committed when it is concluded that one thing causes another simply because they are regularly associated. More formally, this family is committed when it is concluded that A is the cause of B simply because A and B are regularly connected. Ad hoc pro hoc. Let's see if we can find that. Ad hoc pro hoc, I think it's called. Post hoc ergo propter hoc, that's the one. Post hoc ergo propter hoc, Latin after this, therefore because of this, is a logical fallacy of the questionable cause variety, right? That states, since event Y followed event X, event Y must have been caused by event X. It is often shortened to simply post hoc fallacy. It is subtlety. It is a little bit, I guess, different from the fallacy cum hoc ergo propter hoc, when this, therefore because of this, in which two things or events occur simultaneously, or the chronological ordering is insignificant or unknown. Post hoc is a particularly tempting error because temporal sequences appear to be integral to causality. The whole causality thing is interesting. The fallacy lies in coming to a conclusion based solely on the order of events, rather than taking into account other factors that might rule out the connection. See? It's good. This is talking about the same thing here. Ignoring a common cause. Questionable cause. In many cases, this fallacy is quite evident. For example, if a person claimed that a person sneezing was caused by her watery eyes, and he simply ignored the fact that the woman was standing in a hayfield, he would have fallen prey to the fallacy of ignoring a common cause. In this case, it would be reasonable to conclude that the woman's sneezing and watering eyes were caused by an allergic reaction of some kind. In other cases, it is not as evident that the fallacy is being committed. For example, a doctor might find a large amount of bacteria in one of her patients and conclude that the bacteria are the cause of the patient's illness. However, it might turn out that the bacteria are actually harmless and that a virus is weakening the person. Yeah, it's also interesting. I may have mentioned this before, but I was kind of surprised to find out that viruses are more like machines than living organisms, whereas bacteria are really living organisms. Thus, the viruses would be the actual cause of the illness and growth of the bacteria. The viruses would weaken the ability of the person's body to resist the growth of bacteria. As noted in the discussion of other causal fallacies, causality is a rather difficult matter. Yes. However, it is possible to avoid this fallacy by taking due care. In the case of ignoring a common cause, the key to avoiding this fallacy is to be careful to check for other factors that might be the actual cause of both the suspected cause and the suspected effect. Right? Think of global warming, for instance. If such a thing does exist. If a person fails to check for the possibility of a common cause, then they will commit this fallacy. Thus, it is always a good idea to to ask, could there be a third factor, like the sun, that is actually causing both A and B? There's some examples here, however, I do think it might be good to do a little bit more on causality. Causality is the relation between an event, the cause, and the second event, the effect, where the first event is understood to be responsible for the second. In common usage, causality is also the relation between a set of factors, causes, and the phenomenon, the effect. Anything that affects an effect is a factor of that effect. Right? What does it say? Anything that affects an effect is a factor of that effect. A direct factor is a factor that affects an effect directly, that is, without any intervening factors. Intervening factors are sometimes called intermediate factors. The connection between a cause and an effect in this way can also be referred to as a causal nexus. Causes and effects are typically related to change, events, or processes. Such causes are Aristotle's moving causes. Yeah. That's why in ancient, what's that, Louis Sol, he got told on air, "Sun, don't put out heat." And if you think that, you're a Texas size, bro. Yeah. Yeah, the sun doesn't put out heat, right? I've heard that. I don't know. How do these people come up with these ideas, right? It's unbelievable. Yeah, anyway, such causes are Aristotle's moving causes. I was going to say that's why in the ancient scriptures of the Indian people from India, the Vedas, the head god there, the cause of all causes, as they call it, right, has certain properties, right, and they call it or her or he or the androgynous one immovable, right? So why do they call it immovable? Because if it were moved, then there had to be a cause of that. And so, there can't be some other thing that causes God to move besides himself, right? And they call him the cause of all causes. But then he must be immovable. The word cause is also used to mean explanation or answer to a why question, including Aristotle's material, final and formal causes. Then the cause is the explanation, while the effect is the explanandum, whatever that is. In this case, I guess the explanandum. Maybe we should check that later. In this case, there are various recognizable kinds of cause. Candidates includes object, processes, properties, variables, facts, and states of affairs. Failure to recognize that different kinds of cause are being considered can lead to debate. Right? I would add to that force, one of the things. processes, force, speed, right? The philosophical treatment on the subject of causality extends over millennia. In the Western philosophical tradition, discussion stretches back at least to Aristotle. Yes. And the topic remains a staple in contemporary philosophy, which is today's philosophy. Yes, it's a tough subject. It's one of the reasons why I've talked so much in the past about the universe and its origins. Right? What caused the universe? I would even claim that there is no cause for the universe because it has always existed. I try to bend my way around that problem of causality, you see. Let's see, where were we? Examples of ignoring a common cause. One day, Bill wakes up with a fever. A few hours later, he finds red spots on his skin. He concludes that the fever must have caused the red spots. His friend insists that the spots and the fever are caused by some microbe. Bill laughs at this and insists that if he spends the day in a tub of cold water, his spots will go away. Example number 2 of ignoring a common cause. Over the course of several weeks, the needles from the pine trees along the Wombat River fell into the water. Shortly thereafter, many dead fish washed up on the riverbanks. When the EPA investigated, the owners of the Wombat River Chemical Company claimed that it was obvious that the pine needles had killed the fish. Many local environmentalists claimed that the chemical plant's toxic waste caused both the trees and the fish to die, and that the pine needles had no real effect on the fish. Good example. 3. A thunderstorm wakes Joe up in the middle of the night. He goes downstairs to get some milk to help him get back to sleep. On the way to the refrigerator, he notices that the barometer has fallen a great deal. Joe concludes that the storm caused the barometer to fall. In the morning, he tells his wife about his conclusion. She tells him that it was a drop in atmospheric pressure that caused the barometer to drop and the storm. Right? Another good example. Alright, so I guess the next one would be middle ground, but I think I'm gonna call it for today. I guess the stolen concept thing, I'll put that into bladwijzers, as we say in Dutch. Make one already, this one also, so we can get back to that at some later point. Go away, I can go away. Alright. Couple of people in the chat still there. 8 Hawks, Anon37, Del, Nick, Dan, Duckme, Hopper, JJ, Joe, Mr. Cypher, Mrs. Delight, Otto, Liza, also known as Popalupa, Tomato. Did I miss one? I just saw it jump.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically
Everybody, hey there.
secret societies, secret oaths.
I'll be back next week. Take care.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of